And then with the murder of Mike Brown, it sort of everything became an emergency. I'm Brendan Roediger. I'm a lawyer and I direct the civil litigation clinic at St. Louis University. The debtor prison litigation really was born, I would say, in 2013. So MJ, John, Thomas, the co-founders of ArchCity Defenders, and myself, John Ammon, and a lawyer named Steve Hanlon, we're really starting to talk about what we were seeing in municipal courts. And just to talk, if I can talk briefly about municipal courts. So I came from practicing in Illinois. I didn't know what they were. I came to St. Louis University, and John Ammon, who's my mentor and a professor, said, well, you have to do night court work. And I said, what do you mean I have to do night? I don't like to work at night. Why would I do night court work? He said, well, whatever you do, if you claim that you're doing work in the interests of poor people in St. Louis, you have to do that work because it's the work that most impacts folks here. He was absolutely right. I think ArchCity Defenders, from the very beginning, saw that need. Both the SLU legal clinics and ArchCity Defenders worked with unhoused folks extensively. Municipal court cases were a constant problem for our clients. So we started having sort of informal conversations about how to take a systemic approach. That culminated in a list of demands, a meeting with the St. Louis County presiding judge, and sort of, some thinking about the future and what the next 5 or 10 years, we were really talking in terms of 5 or 10 years, would look like in terms of advocacy around municipal courts. And then with the murder of Mike Brown, it sort of everything became an emergency. And the cases were probably filed so quickly in large part because of this feeling that there was a need to do something in the moment. What was it like? I think it was different for every person. I come from the sort of like traditional protest background, lefty bookstores, police violence organizing, went to law school wanting to do this type of work. Every protest that I had ever been a part of was full of what you would call the usual characters, right? The people that you saw at every protest. Sometimes some new young people that were getting swept into some sectarian leftist organization, at least for 6 months, would be there. This was not something I had seen. I mean, I think the reason that this was so scary to the state was because it was not people that were recognizable as being a part of the opposition. It was an organic uprising in every sense. It was sort of, just all of a sudden the streets erupted. So for me, deep sadness at just, like the spectacle of sorrow and rage that the streets were sort of every day. Also, like deep hope, like, oh, this is there? I had no idea this was there. I had no idea this resistance was there. This is different. Like, they're not ready for this. They were always ready for me and 50 friends holding signs. They're not ready for this. And so, yeah, those were sort of the feelings that anything was possible some of the days, which in retrospect maybe seems utopian and silly, but it did feel like that. And I think a lot of us felt like, oh, this is different. Like, we can do whatever the fuck we want. So how do municipal courts and the sort of the predatory nature of municipal courts intersect with the murder of Mike Brown and this movement? And that's a big question, and it's where my complicated feelings about the debtor prison litigation stem from. As I said, we were talking about litigation around municipal courts before Mike Brown was murdered. It would have happened. Whether it made sense in that moment is still something that I struggle with. I think the connections are pretty obvious. So to talk about the connections, the type of policing that led to Mike Brown's murder was the type of policing that is encouraged by these municipal courts. Get the fuck out of the street, right? That's the type of policing. There's a connection there. The reality is that we had protesters getting arrested en masse every night and getting shuffled from city to city because of the practices of municipal courts. That's another connection. We also, were sort of seeing all of these departments on the street. Ferguson obviously was the center of things, but Florissant, Northwoods, Pine Lawn, St. Louis City, right? Like protests were everywhere. And people were terrified of cops in large part because they knew that they could end up doing the muni shuffle and going from place to place. So there were connections. On the other hand, it was a movement that was about grief and anger over the murder of a person. And this did allow for a switch in the sort of talking point. Do I feel like things have changed in St. Louis? Well, certainly there's ArchCity is a vibrant, functioning organization that helps hundreds of people every year. There are young leaders, not so young anymore, but a new generation of leaders that would never have existed. More seems possible in some ways. Do I think there have been substantive changes in how brutal this city is? No, I don't.